Today I want to talk about millennials, and I want to talk about millennials for two reasons. One, because we're going into a new year, and it seems sort of, I don't know why it seems relevant to me, but it does. And secondly, because I shouldn't say often, but sometimes I hear people complaining about the millennials. But what's interesting to me is when I look at millennials, we hear some people complaining that, they don't work hard, they're lazy, they feel entitled. Again, bear with me, millennials. And I don't find that pervasively. Do I find it at times? Sure, I do, of course. But I also find people who are baby boomers that are lazy and all the same things. So it's interesting to understand this. And I want to take this full circle in the sense of there was a video that was published in 1968 talking about what might sound a lot like millennials. And of course, what it'll turn out to be is those were the baby boomers. And the parallelism of what we hear about millennials now and what was said about baby boomers then. Think about the employment thing. And if you go back far enough, at least my grandparents' generation, they literally did stand in line and fight for one job. I mean, there'd be a slew of people looking for one job. And now we have people who complain they can't find good help, or we have people who complain they can't find a good job. And it's ironic that we have both sets of people complaining they can't find good either. And I think there's an expectations issue there. You look at that point, the older generation, the parents, if you will, were complaining about what would become a baby boomer. Perhaps the doctor sitting here watching this, and how they wanted all the same things that our millennials want today. And I don't have an issue with people wanting more, and wanting more even having to do less. I mean, that's just human nature. We're all going to be that way. But it does cause some challenges in the workforce, and it causes some challenges when we're talking to patients about acceptance. There are some generational differences, and I want to cover a few of those because I think they're important. What is interesting to me about millennials is that it's a very skeptical, cynical group of people. And that's oftentimes what drives some of their behavior. There's a fair amount of scarcity mindset, subconsciously. I don't think it's consciously, because they want to help a lot. I mean, they're very big on causes. If you look at some of the riots that have taken place here in the last few months, whether it's because of elections or police brutality, there's a lot of millennials that are out protesting things that they don't think are right. So I don't see them as selfish people. I see them as people who are very invested in a cause. But I do see him as a bit skeptical and cynical. And let's really think about why that is. And to me, the reason why that is because they've seen so many institutions fail them. And what I mean by that is think about the average millennial. They watched their parents grow up, and they saw someone maybe who worked for Enron. And all of a sudden, they have this amazing job, this amazing opportunity, and all of a sudden the job is gone, right? Or corporate cuts that take place. And there was an article that was on the news fairly recently about jobs from Carrier air conditioners. We're going to go overseas to Mexico. I guess not overseas, south of the border anyway. And so you have all these corporate people trying to decrease costs, and they're boogers, they're bad people because they're trying to cut costs. The irony of that, of course, is we all want the cheapest price. Can't coexist at the same time. So there's a skepticism of corporate America that they can't be trusted, right? We see the banking industry, the financial institutions taking advantage of people. So millennials struggle to trust corporate America. Secondly is have had issues with schools. Some people struggle to trust the religious institution. Then you have the institution of marriage. And you watch the average millennial, and myself included in this statistic, and 50% of their parents got divorced. How can you even trust your own family? And what's interesting with the millennials is there's one organization they do trust, maybe even two. It's Google. And I don't know that they trust Google per se, but what they do is the minute you give them a diagnosis of what they need, the minute you turn around and walk out, what do? They grab their phone and they Google it. So what's interesting about that is they trust Google. Now, why do they trust Google? Is it Google they trust? I don't think so. I think what they actually trust is crowd information, peer information, right? Facebook information. Where do lots of people get their news? Facebook. People will lie, cheat, and steal to be elected into an elected office. They'll lie, cheat, and steal over all kinds of crazy things. And I don't know I don't think that's a generational thing, sadly. It's probably a selfish thing. And if you look at Facebook, it's become a very, very selfish sort of place, right? It's all about me, 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 me. Look at how amazing my life is. You don't really see people putting up real life. And you'll see the people who put up the opposite of, let me tell you how terrible my life is. And if you've been around us long, you understand the 6 human needs. And those people are serving that same need of significance. They're just doing it with a negative slant. So it's interesting to me that as I look at all of this and I see how it all kind of comes together, it's no wonder we have some millennials that have a hard time trusting. And there were some of the baby boomers who had a hard time trusting. They didn't trust the government. I forgot the government. I don't think you can trust the government. Does anyone disagree with you can't trust the government? But if you go back to the 70s, how many of that generation trusted the government? How many people protested the Vietnam War? Good, bad, I don't know. How many people protested all kinds of stuff? I guess my point is I don't see the millennials truly being that different than any other generation. Do they have some quirkiness? Sure. But do the others have some quirkiness too? Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. The only one that doesn't is my generation, because we're in the middle. We don't have I'm just kidding. We're all quirky as can be. We're all broken people. The reality is we are all broken people that either can come together as broken people, acknowledge it, be honest, be vulnerable, and grow together, or we can all put up a front, lie, cheat, and steal. I don't see the point in the put up the front, lie, cheat, and steal. I can at least tell you from my perspective, it did not work out well. I wouldn't suggest it for anybody. So as you sit there looking across the table at your fellow millennial, I wouldn't judge them so harshly, because if you're a baby boomer, you were just like them a mere 30 years ago. And if you're a millennial looking at me wondering if I'm someone who's trustworthy, well, that's up to you to decide, I guess. But I think we need to quit judging each other.